The neighbors were watching. I could see the curtains moving, small shifts, careful glances from behind glass. I was 73 years old, sitting on the front step of my own home, and my son had just changed the locks. The key I had used for 31 years did not fit anymore. I tried it twice slowly, as if I had simply misremembered how to turn it. Then I stood there and looked at the door. I had one bag beside me. One bag. After 41 years of marriage, 31 years in that house, one bag was all I walked away with. Not because I had nothing, because I was not given time to take more. I did not cry. I was too far past shock to cry. I sat on that cold concrete step in the afternoon light and I thought about the safe. The one my husband Marcus had kept locked for all 41 years of our marriage. The one he told me, more than once quietly, always with that calm certainty of his, would protect me when the time came. I never knew what he meant. Sitting on that step with nowhere to go, I finally did. Stay with me. Because what Marcus left inside that safe did not just save my home. It exposed everything my son had been hiding, and it changed the rest of my life in ways I am still learning to believe. Marcus and I had 41 years together. Not perfect years, real ones. The kind filled with small arguments about the thermostat and long Sunday silences that never once felt empty. He was a methodical man. Careful. He thought 10 years ahead the way other people think about next week. We raised Daniel in that house. Watched him grow up in its hallways, leave for college, come back on holidays, build a life of his own. I was proud of him. For a long time I was very proud of him. Marcus died 8 months before any of this happened. A heart attack, sudden, no warning, no goodbye. He was here in the morning and gone by the afternoon. I did not get to hold his hand. That is the part one have never found a way to say out loud without my voice breaking. People tell you grief gets easier. What they do not tell you is that in those first months you do not really grieve, you simply survive. You make tea you do not drink. You sit in rooms that feel too wide. You forget mid-sentence that the person you were about to call is no longer there to answer. Daniel arrived 2 weeks after the funeral. He stood in the doorway with a bag over his shoulder and said he wanted to take care of me, that he could not bear the idea of me alone in this house. I stepped aside and let him in. What mother would not? The first few weeks were gentle. He cooked sometimes. He drove me to appointments. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and we talked about Marcus the way two people do when they are both trying to keep someone alive in the air between them. Then things began to shift, slowly enough that I almost did not notice. He offered to manage my bank account, just to keep things organized, he said, to make sure the bills were paid on time. I thanked him and handed over the details. My pension correspondence stopped arriving in the mail. He told me he had redirected it to his email to avoid confusion. He said the paperwork was complicated and I should not have to deal with it. I nodded and told myself this was kindness. His wife Brenda arrived in the second month. She had a way of moving through rooms as though she had already decided they were hers. She rearranged the kitchen without asking. She invited her friends for lunch and introduced me as Daniel's mom, the way you might introduce a house guest who had overstayed her welcome. In the third month, they moved me out of the master bedroom. Brenda said it was more practical for them to have the larger space. She had already chosen curtains. I moved my things down the hall to the small guest room and told myself it did not matter. It was only a room. The guest room had one closet, and in the back corner of that closet, bolted to the floor, was the safe. Marcus had installed it himself years ago. I had walked past it 1,000 times without thinking twice. Now, alone in that small room every night, I started to notice it differently. His voice would come back to me in the dark. Quiet, certain, the way he always sounded when he had already worked something out. Eleanor, that safe is for you. But only when the time is right. You will know. I had always assumed he meant after he retired. After some distant, peaceful moment. I had never imagined he meant something like this. A solicitor's office called the house in the 4th month. I did not receive the call. I did not even know it had been made until much later. Daniel had answered, and whatever was said, he had handled it. He did not mention it to me. Not once. One evening I passed the study. The door was half open. Daniel and Brenda were speaking in low voices over papers spread across the desk. They had not heard me stop. I caught 2 words before I kept walking. The deed. I went to the kitchen and filled the kettle and stood there until it boiled. I told myself it meant nothing. I went to bed. I did not sleep. If you have ever watched someone slowly take something from you, piece by piece, quietly enough that you question yourself, then you already know exactly what the next few months felt like. Keep watching, because what Daniel did next was not impulsive. It was planned. 3 days later I found the papers. I had gone into the study to look for a pen, and there they were, left carelessly on the edge of the desk, or perhaps not carelessly at all. The house deed. My name and Marcus's name at the top, and beneath it, handwritten notes in Daniel's writing. Dates. Names of people I did not recognize. An appointment marked in red. I stood in that room for a long time. Then I put the papers back exactly where I had found them. I walked to the kitchen. I sat down, and I waited for Daniel to come home. When I asked him about it, he did not look surprised. He set down his keys and pulled out a chair and sat across from me the way a doctor might sit across from a patient, measured, prepared. He told me the house was technically in both names now and that things were complicated after a death. He used the word estate. He used the phrase going forward. He told me I was emotional, and that was understandable. Then he said I was not well enough to manage all of this on my own, that he and Brenda had been worried for some time, that there were options, good options for women my age who needed support. He slid a brochure across the table. Care facility, clean photographs, smiling staff, a garden with benches. Brenda stood in the doorway the entire time. She did not say a word. She did not need to. Her silence said everything that Daniel had not. I looked at the brochure. Then I looked at my son. I thought about the boy I had raised in this house. The boy who had cried at Marcus's funeral and held my hand at the graveside. I thought about 41 years of a life built in these rooms. Then I pushed the brochure back across the table and told him I was going to bed. He called after me that we would talk more in the morning. We did not talk in the morning. In the morning I went to the grocery store. I bought bread, milk, the tea Marcus had always preferred. I was gone for 40 minutes. When I came back, my key did not fit the lock. I knocked. There was a long pause before the door opened. Daniel stood in the frame. Behind him the hallway looked different. My coat was not on the hook. My shoes were not on the mat. He told me arrangements had been made. He said it the way you might say the car has been serviced. Arrangements had been made. A bag sat on the step beside me. Brenda had packed it. My good cardigan was not in it. The photograph from the bedroom nightstand, Marcus and me on our wedding day, was not in it. A taxi was idling at the curb. Daniel held out a document. Sign the house over, he said, and the transition to the facility would be seamless. He used the word seamless. I looked at the paper. I looked at him. I told him I would not be signing anything. He closed the door. I sat on the step for over an hour. The taxi eventually left. The street was very quiet. At some point, my neighbor from across the road, Mrs. Patton, 68, a woman I had known for 20 years, opened her front door and looked at me for a moment. She did not say anything dramatic. She simply said, "Come inside, Eleanor, and put the kettle on." I picked up the bag and crossed the street. I want you to stay with this story, because what happened next, what James found when he started pulling at the threads of Daniel's plan, was not just surprising. It was the moment I understood that Marcus had never stopped protecting me, not even after he died. Don't go anywhere. Mrs. Patton made tea and did not rush me. She sat across from me at her kitchen table and let me talk. I told her about the deed and the brochure and the bag without my cardigan in it. I told her about Marcus. I told her about the safe. I did not mean to say so much. Once I started, I could not seem to stop. She listened to all of it. Then she said quietly that her son James was a solicitor. She asked if she could call him. James Patton arrived the following morning. He was methodical in the way Marcus had been, not unkind but precise. He asked careful questions and wrote careful notes. Then he asked me one thing that made the room go very still. He said, "Mrs. Marsh, did your husband leave a will?" I told him what Daniel had told me, that there was no will, that Marcus had not got around to it. James nodded slowly. Then he made a phone call. Then another. He was on the phone for a long time. When he came back to the table and sat down, he placed his notepad in front of him and said, "Mrs. Marsh, your husband registered a will 6 months before he died. It was filed with a firm called Hargrove and Associates. They have been attempting to contact you for months. Every call was intercepted." He knew. The room shifted around me. I gripped the edge of the table and breathed. Marcus had known. Not that he would die so soon. He could not have known that, but he had known Daniel. He had seen something in his own son that I had refused to see, and quietly, without alarming me, without a single word, he had built a wall around me. James kept talking, but I heard only pieces of it. Sole ownership. Unconditional. The safe contents listed as a protected asset, to be received by Eleanor Marsh, witnessed and notarized. Daniel had no legal claim to the house. He had never had one. The only document I had ever needed was the one locked behind a combination I had memorized from a birthday card 3 years ago, and never once forgotten. If this story is hitting close to home, if you know someone who has been treated the way I was treated, share this video with them. Sometimes people need to hear that it is possible to find a way through. And we are not through yet. Because what Daniel did next was worse than anything that had come before. James sent a formal letter to Daniel the following day. The response came through Daniel's own solicitor within 48 hours. They were filing for guardianship. They were claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my affairs. They had apparently already gathered statements. I was not shocked. That was the strangest part. I was not shocked at all. I had spent 40 years trusting my instincts about children, and knowing when someone was afraid of being caught. Daniel was afraid. And afraid men do not stop, they accelerate. Then James found something that changed everything. In the estate documents buried in the administration trail, there was a record of contact. Daniel had first reached out to the care facility 14 months ago. 14 months. Marcus had still been alive. Daniel had been planning this before his father's body was in the ground. I sat with that for a long time. I thought about the last year of Marcus's life, the Sunday lunches, the birthday calls, the way Daniel had hugged him at Christmas. And underneath all of it, the planning. The quiet, patient, greedy planning. James obtained an emergency court order within 72 hours. I was legally entitled to access my own home. A constable would accompany us. We drove there on a gray Tuesday morning. I watched the street come into view from the car window. The hedges needed trimming. Marcus had always trimmed them himself. Daniel opened the door. His face was a color I had not seen on him before. Not quite white, not quite gray. Brenda was somewhere behind him. I could hear her but not see her. James stepped forward and said something formal and official. The constable stood slightly to the left, and I walked in. I did not look at Daniel. I did not look at the redecorated hallway or the new furniture in the sitting room or the curtains Brenda had chosen. I walked directly to the back of the house, down the hall, and into the small guest room. And there it was, still bolted to the floor of the closet, untouched, waiting. I lowered myself to the floor in front of it. My knees do not like cold floors anymore. I did not care. I placed my hands on either side of the dial and I began to turn it. Left, then right, then left again. The numbers Marcus had written in his neat handwriting on a small card tucked inside my birthday card 3 years ago. Happy birthday, my love. The combination is for when you need it. You will know. The safe clicked open. I need you to stay right here. Because what I found inside that safe, what Marcus had quietly placed there piece by piece over years, was not just evidence. It was a love story. And it was a verdict. Keep watching. Inside was a brown envelope, thick and slightly worn at the edges. A smaller white envelope beneath it sealed with my name on it in Marcus's handwriting. And beneath that, a folded document tied with a red ribbon, the kind solicitors use, and a photograph. The photograph was of a cottage. Stone walls, a green door, a window with a window box. Somewhere coastal from the look of the sky. On the back, in Marcus's hand, were 2 words and a set of coordinates. It's yours. The brown envelope held the insurance policy. A secondary policy Daniel had been told did not exist. The beneficiary line read, Eleanor Ruth Marsh. Sole and unconditional. The figure written there was enough to live on, properly, comfortably, without asking anyone for anything, for the rest of my life. The folded document was the property deed to the cottage. Paid in full, 2 years before Marcus died, transferred into my name alone. He had bought me a home before he left. He had bought me a way out before I even knew I would need one. I sat on the floor with the white envelope in my hands for a long time before I opened it. James was standing in the doorway. I had almost forgotten he was there. He did not speak. He seemed to understand that whatever this moment was, it did not need witnesses. The letter was 7 pages long. Marcus's handwriting, close and careful, every line straight without lines to guide it. He began with my name. Not Eleanor. Not love. Just my name, the way he said it when he wanted me to really hear him. He wrote about the years. About what he had seen and what he had worried about and what he had hoped he was wrong about. He wrote about Daniel with a grief that I recognized. The grief of a parent who loves a child deeply and sees clearly who that child has become. He did not write with bitterness. He wrote with sorrow. And he wrote with a precision that only someone who had thought about it for a very long time could manage. Toward the end, he had written a passage I read twice before I stood up. I want you to hear it the way I heard it, not as accusation, not as warning, but as the voice of a man who spent 40 years making sure the woman he loved would never have to rely on anyone else's mercy. He wrote, I could not stay. But everything I could give you, I gave you. The house, the cottage, the policy, this letter. Whatever comes, you are not alone. You were never going to be alone. I made certain of it. I walked back down the hall to the sitting room. Daniel and Brenda were seated on the sofa. James stood near the door. The constable remained in the hallway. I placed the insurance document and the property deed on the coffee table between us and sat down in the armchair. The armchair Marcus had always sat in, and I looked at my son. Daniel stared at the documents. He reached for them and James said quietly that he would rather he did not. Daniel's solicitor, who had joined by phone, went silent when James outlined what we had found. There was a long pause on the line. Then the solicitor said he would need to speak with his client privately and ended the call. Brenda began to cry. She said she had not known it would go this far. She said she had only wanted to help Daniel. She said a great many things. I did not respond to any of them. I was tired of being managed by people who called their greed helpfulness. The guardianship filing collapsed within the week. Without the financial dependency narrative, without a single document proving I was incapable, without even the house as leverage, there was nothing left to file. The care facility booking, the one Daniel had made 14 months ago, was quietly canceled. Daniel and Brenda were given 30 days to vacate. I did not watch them leave. I stayed at Mrs. Patton's until the house was empty. When I walked back in on the 31st day, the silence was different. Not hollow the way it had been after Marcus died, but clean. The rooms were just rooms again. I did not stay long. I had somewhere else to be. The cottage was 3 hours north, just off the coast road. I drove up on a Friday morning with 2 bags, properly packed this time, everything I wanted, and the photograph Marcus had left me in the safe. The coordinates had taken me to a lane off the main road, and the lane had taken me to a low stone wall, and beyond the wall was the green door. It was smaller than it looked in the photograph. The window box had been planted with something I did not yet know the name of. The key was exactly where James had told me it would be, under a flat stone to the left of the step. I opened the door and stood in the entrance for a moment. The light inside was soft, the way light is when a room has been waiting quietly rather than sitting empty. And then I saw the chair. By the window, angled toward the sea view, a wingback armchair. The deep gray-blue Marcus had always called the proper color for a reading chair. And on the small table beside it, a box of the tea I had always preferred. He had been here. Not recently, years ago, but he had stood in this room and thought about me sitting in it. He had chosen the chair and the tea and the angle of the window, and he had imagined me there without him, and he had tried to make it as close to all right as a person could make a thing they could not stay for. I sat down in the chair. I had the rest of his letter with me. I had not finished it at the house. I finished it there, by the window, with the sea in the distance and the tea going cold beside me because I kept forgetting to drink it. The last line was very short. He had always known when to stop talking. He wrote, "You will be fine, Eleanor. You always were. I just needed you to know it too." I folded the letter. I put it back in its envelope. I set it on the table next to the tea. Outside the window the water was very still, and the light was doing that thing it does in the late afternoon when it turns everything gold and unhurried. And I sat in the chair my husband had chosen for me, and I let myself, finally, grieve him properly. Not the sharp, terrible grief of the first weeks. The quieter kind. The grateful kind. The kind that only comes when you understand fully that a person loved you as well as a person can. If this story stayed with you, if Eleanor's strength or Marcus's love, or even Daniel's betrayal made you feel something, then please subscribe. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about real people, real choices, and what it means to hold your dignity when everything around you is trying to take it away. Drop a comment below and tell me, did you see Daniel's plan coming? Or did the safe surprise you? I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story like this right now, someone who is going through something hard and needs to be reminded that they are not alone, share this with them. Sometimes the right story finds you at exactly the right time. There is another story waiting for you on screen right now. I think you will want to watch it. I will see you there.